For a number of years now, I've been doing research with my colleague Andrew Malinsky on a class of tasks we refer to as necessary evils. Necessary evils are tasks that entail doing harm in order to advance a perceived greater good. So we've interviewed managers who perform layoffs or terminate contracts. We've interviewed doctors who perform painful medical procedures and deliver bad news. We've interviewed police officers who evict people from their homes, and we've interviewed addiction counselors who administer discipline and expel people from a tough love treatment facility. And our interest really was, how do people do tasks that are likely to elicit exactly the opposite sort of response that would be most resourceful and constructive? And that is, when you go to do one of these tasks, you really have a flight response. You'd prefer not to do it. It's sort of like poking yourself in the eye, that your response is likely to be exactly the opposite of what is going to be most effective. And yet what we observed was that while there's a wealth of research in organizational behavior on a variety of forms of justice, what's called, under the umbrella of organizational justice, there's procedural justice, informational justice, interpersonal justice. A lot of that research says, here is how those on the receiving end of harm ideally need to be treated in order for the outcomes to be better than they would otherwise be. Here's what they expect from those who are imposing harm on them or unfavorable outcomes. Here's what they expect in the form of treatment. And yet there's very little research on, well, what's the challenge like for those who society and organizations asks to discharge these tasks that impose harm? What's their experience like, and how do they deal with the challenge of simultaneously having to get the task done and at the same time witness someone who's experiencing harm, and at the same time be the person who provides some support, some comfort, or a cushion, who delivers what we refer to as interpersonal sensitivity. So there was very little research on that. That's why we set out to study those 4 occupational groups. And what we found is quite contrary to what prior research has suggested. So there's nice research on harm doing. And that research suggests that when people go to do things that are harmful to others, they tend to disengage or detach psychologically. There's also research on what happens when people have to do tasks that are interpersonally intimate, like caregivers. And what that research often finds is that people burn out, and when they burn out, they depersonalize their conduct towards the other person. What we found was that in well over 50% of the individuals whom we studied, they in fact engaged psychologically with what they were doing. That is, they attended to the harm that was being visited upon the person on the receiving end. They in fact registered their emotions and were cognizant of their own emotions, that they also were in touch with their own humanity rather than simply saying, look, I'm just playing a role. This isn't me. This isn't the company. We certainly had people who disengaged, that is, who didn't connect with their own emotions, who didn't recognize or acknowledge the impact on the other human being, and who also tried to kind of subjugate their own humanity. But what we found was that a fair number of people really did engage with what they were doing and tried to navigate the ambivalence that they felt about, on the one hand, having to meet their professional responsibilities, having to advance the purpose, the worthy purpose that was the cause for this task, like helping the firm rebound financially or helping someone get better. So there were people who engaged, and what we also found was that in their conduct to get this task done, they were often quite creative. We use the term, they personalized their interpersonal conduct towards the other person. They customized it in a way that was reflective both of their own personal touch and was also reflective of what they felt the person on the receiving end most needed. And so what we found is that people engage and that they customize their conduct. And what we find kind of inspiring about this research is that so much of research on ethics, so much of research on managers suggests that, for lack of a better word, individuals and organizations can often be seen as moral dopes. That is, they're just going to do wrong. We're wired to do wrong. Conditions are set up to do wrong. And what we in fact find is that human beings are are also wired to do good. They are able to live with ambivalence. They are able to recognize multiple responsibilities, and they really do their best to maneuver within the constraints that they find to fulfill their multiple responsibilities, even when they're concentrated in a single task like a necessary evil.